Well, thank you all for being here. Welcome to COVID Connect. It is Friday, April 10th, Good Friday, and none of us have missed that connection, whatever our persuasion. We are very thankful for all those who are out there making sacrifices today. And we want to just once again thank all of the healthcare workers out there. What you're going through is unprecedented. I also want to thank all of the people from the companies listed on this slide that really responded to the call when we first sent out the message to say, hey, can we get together as a community? This isn't something that we've done. This is something that the community has done. And we're very thankful to everyone who responded late night to those calls and emails and everything else. So we're very thankful for that. Just a note, we're going to have our open forum as usual later today. The webinar will be available, so don't clog the chat box with will this be available? Yes, it will. They're all available on intobeing.com/COVID-Connect. You can get to all the past webinars there, the resource lists, and everything else. If you chat, please put your information in, put your name, put your contact information, put what you can do for the community, put what you need from the community, put it all in there. Just make sure it goes to all panelists and all attendees if that's an option for you. Put that down there. And if I call for you and you've raised your hand and I call you, please get off of mute and make sure your speakers are isolated from your microphone so that we don't have any issues with that. Keep it brief. We need your name, your company, your needs, your efforts, your ideas. We do want to hear from you. People always ask, what does IntoBeing do? We're medical device developers, expertise in regulatory compliance and submissions, design for manufacturing, prototyping. Let us know what you need and how we can help out. We can help with introductions, quick, free, get you unstuck explanations. And we can do what we do every day too. If you really need the deep, in-depth product development, regulatory support, we're more than happy to do that. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to tell you some of the latest news that's happening. We're then going to highlight some resources and efforts that are going on in the state and around the country. And we've got some guests with us today to tell you about that. We want to take a moment and really highlight some of the successes that have been happening, even as we're noticing that there's a lot of things that are, and we're peeling the onion. There's a lot of things that we haven't figured out and people are trying to figure out and putting things together. So we'll be talking about those later in the program, but we're going to start with some good news from a lot of our friends. Then we're going to review FDA's updated emergency use authorizations and enforcement guidance. We're going to go back to Q&A. If anyone has any questions on things that we've talked about in previous shows, please let us know and we'll talk about it. Then we're going to do our community open forum, 30-second check-ins. We want to hear from the conveners. We want to hear from the healthcare professionals, the test houses, the material suppliers, the manufacturers, diagnostics companies, and folks doing regulatory support. I want to hear from all of you and give you a chance to check in. So with that, I am going to unshare this screen. And I am really, I'm going to go through the news here. So just a couple of headlines. The US government under the Defense Production Act is paying Philips $646 million to deliver 2,500 ventilators to the Strategic National Stockpile by the end of May 2020, with a total of 43,000 ventilators delivered by the end of the year, according to a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services news release. This from Mass Device, the news agency. And of course, we've heard a lot about ventilators coming and going all over the place. We will see what pans out, but that's at least another big effort that's underway. Also this from AdvaMed, a series of white papers published evidence and case studies from China and Italy concluded that coronavirus patients with respiratory distress less severe than other cases could receive treatment with non-invasive ventilation therapy, freeing more invasive ventilator devices for the most critically ill patients amid a shortage of equipment. This from AdvaMed, some opinion there. We learned that Steris just got their EUA yesterday on their sterilization system for N95 masks. That brings to 2 the number of companies able to do that. And Terumo just got EUA yesterday for extracorporeal blood purification. And so that's good news. We also wanted to highlight there is a local group in need of pediatric gowns and small N95s. If you have any leads on that, please, please, please make yourself known. Because that is a real need for the peds. And this from one of our healthcare professionals who will remain anonymous. Body bags and isolation gowns are the in-demand items right now. Also, reagents for COVID testing. Many health systems keep saying that they have large quantities of N95s on order, even though we're waiting to see them appear in our stock rooms again. So the problem is not resolved yet. But some good news coming out that we'll talk more about in the show. IFAI has a resource for patterns for PPE. So some of you who are thinking about gowns and other things like that, there are now some resources for that, some patterns and other things. We also have some docs who are looking at those and giving their feedback. So we'll talk about that more a little bit later in the show. And one contact you're going to make today that I do want to highlight because it was just so exciting for me, Murray Goodwin from SGS in Appleton, Wisconsin. They actually have mask testing capabilities. I know a lot of you have been asking for that. And Murray made himself known. I think he's going to be on with us a little bit later when we talk to the suppliers. And we're excited that he made himself known. Also, I want to reemphasize that many folks have databases that we'll touch on. Pure Michigan Business Connect through the MEDC is one of those central locations. The data that you guys put into the chat box goes to them so that they can aggregate. It's also available to all of you for your use and research. Again, you can go to intobeing.com/COVID-Connect and you can find all the data from the previous webinars as well as recordings and everything else. We're actually cleaning up that data. We are getting a one uniform spreadsheet, and that's what's being shared with folks after this meeting. In addition to what we do for medical device development, we've also prepared a pair of checklists for ventilator companies and also for UV sterilization companies. If you have any need for those are on the links page. If you go to intobeing.com, there are COVID-19 regulatory links where most of these things that we're talking about are linked to, so you can get to those. Those have been a lot of help to folks. We'll touch on some of these items in a little more depth later. What I want to do now is I want to welcome some guests on who are going to tell us about efforts across the state and across the country. And first of those is going to be Jim Medsker of Keystone Product Development. Jim, if I can have you unmute your mic, I'm going to try to make sure we get your video back up here. There's Jim. Good to have you, Jim. I just got to tell everyone, Jim was one of the people who responded to the call when we first sent this out and sent all these emails out and got people to come. And he hasn't hardly said any. He's like, oh, I don't want to take the spotlight. I don't want to take anything. But I was like, Jim, you're going to come on and you're going to tell us for just a couple minutes what Keystone's been doing, because you guys have been doing a lot of stuff right on the ground, and we want to hear about it, Jim. So can you just give us, I had you prepared just a couple slides. I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about what Keystone's doing.
Sure. Is the screen being shared?
It's not being shared. Go ahead and hit that share button at the bottom and then click on PowerPoint and it'll be shared. There you go.
How's that? Okay, folks, I'll burn through this as quickly as possible here. So Keystone's tagline right now is deliver, distribute, and donate. That's our three key phrases. It's our mantra right now, right? So along those lines, we're going to cover some of that here. So what are we doing? What do we all need? And what can and should we be doing? That's what the quick theme is here today. Here's a snapshot of Keystone. We're a turnkey development and contract manufacturing resource. We are diverse in development. We do serve multiple industries. However, in manufacturing, excuse me, we are 100% medical device. Our biggest footprint is sterile single-use devices. We do some electromechanical devices as well. A lot of assembly, sourcing, packaging, sterilization management, warehousing, and distribution. So that's a very high-level snapshot of Keystone. What are we doing right now under this deliver, distribute, donate mantra? So wherever we can, we're actually manufacturing things in-house. So we're in the process of manufacturing sterile swabs for sample collection. And also the kits, that's basically a swab combined with a vial. And we're also producing face shields currently as well. Under the distribute tagline, we are leveraging our sourcing database and contacts, looking at bulk, PPE and other supplies that we can buy in bulk, large quantities, warehouse, and then distribute out to the healthcare needs. And then on the donate, all of the above for those products. We have established a monthly budget for donating supplies and PPE goods. What you see there on the slide is a couple of our cut sheets, those for the face shield that we're producing, and also 2 of the swab versions that we're producing as well. So next slide here, there's a picture of our facility. Along the bottom there, there's a handful of pictures. On the left, you see a number of folks working on the face shields. Product getting ready to go out the door. A couple on the right there shows a couple of snapshots of our clean rooms and our automated form fill seal machine and so forth. So that's very quick high level overview of Keystone. We're about 80,000 square feet, about 65 employees. Excuse me. So what's the need? So obviously supplies and products, right? Sterile swabs are in a big demand right now. Sample collection kits, face shields, all the PPE that we've heard about. But what's also in need? Information. We really need to get information as quickly as possible and as completely as possible. And this goes both ways. It's the suppliers of raw materials, components, it's the health groups and so forth. So that's why this forum is so great. I appreciate Jean and your team spearheading this. This is a great forum for information exchange, but we really need to have we all need to be high-speed modems, right, basically. And especially for these regulated items, like the swabs and things like that, make sure we understand the specs required, the testing required, and so forth. And I would caution everybody and encourage everybody before you push anything out to the healthcare groups, really be cautious and confirm the usability within those health groups. And then for your own benefit, determine if this is a one-time blip or it's a recurring order volume, and if the health groups have flexibility for partial releases. So, what can we do and what should we do? So leverage your contacts, everyone, as much as you can, your supply chain, make connections wherever possible. If you happen to have a supply resource that could be very valuable to someone, however, you're not adding value to that particular situation, it would be great, just make a direct connection and let the solution happen. Be transparent. We all need to be very transparent during this critical time. And that middle bullet is probably the most important. Consult the experts, consult people like Gene and his team when it comes to the regulatory things. I know there's a great amount of energy with the entrepreneurs out there and folks that may have not played in the medical field before, and that's awesome. We need every little bit of help we can get. However, I do want to caution everybody as well. We're still treating human beings. There's still a lot of rules and regulations that need to be followed. EUAs do not equate to get out of jail free card, right? It's just an accelerated vehicle right now, and they're not going to be around forever. So as you're pushing products out, as you're looking at exploring opportunities, consult regulatory experts like Gene and his team for guidance on EUAs, labeling, device registration, materials, biocompatibility, certs, and ratings. And when you are reaching out to the health groups, please make sure you have a consistent, reliable supply chain. I think Gene sort of mentioned that earlier. We hear about a lot of products sitting in a warehouse somewhere. It's on a cargo plane. There's millions of this or millions of that. And then the next day we find out it's not really there. And so supply continuity and real commitments are very important. And last but not least, work tirelessly, right? So that's my little 3-minute spiel.
Jim, that's great. We really appreciate that. We appreciate what you're doing. Tell us, and for the whole group who's listening, what can we do for Keystone? What contacts would be worthwhile to send your way? What kinds of relationships are you looking for? What can we do to help the community in your direction?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So right now, our biggest need is on the supply side is raw material, especially PET for the face shields. That's one of our limiting factors right now. We can produce several thousand face shields a day. However, the PET is becoming very hard to come by You know, the smaller folks like us are competing against Ford Motor Company and some bigger concerns. So swab supply, we are set up with architecture to accept foam swabs, flocked swabs, a variety of different styles. Excuse me. And any sourcing information you have on bulk non-sterile swabs is greatly appreciated. And continued contacts with the health groups and possibly distribution channels as well. So it's all about making connections right now.
That's great, Jim. Well, thank you for being here with us. If anyone has any need to get in touch with Keystone, their information is all over the files we've sent out, and we'll continue to send out. And also type it in the chat if you want to say something to Jim. That message can get through even while we're on this webinar. So thanks again, Jim. Really appreciate you being here and really appreciate all the support.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again. Next, we are going to go to John Giszczak. John, I'm going to unmute your mic and ask you to start your video. Last week we were, hey John, oh, you're on mute there. Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
There you go. Last week we were privileged to have Cindy Brown-Massander from Pneumatics tell us about their EUA for their system. I want to hear from you today. You have an affiliation with Cellex, and I'd love if you told us just a bit about yourself and about what happened with Cellex and their EUA.
Yeah, sure. I'm working as a consultant for ECM Medical, based in Hong Kong, which is medical. It's mainly a rapid test distributor that does global distribution of a bunch of different rapid tests. Before this started, they have a distribution contract with Cellex to distribute their test that started about a month before the EUA was approved. As folks may know, Cellex on April 1st became the first, and as of yesterday, I think still as of today, the only company to get a FDA EUA for an antibody test. So this is a serological antibody test. It's designed originally to be used with finger prick, but the FDA EUA is only for venous blood. The FDA EUA is also limited to CLIA labs for moderate and high complexity tests. Not for point of care use, even though the test, of course, was originally designed for point of care use. So there's incredible demand. They're a relatively small company, so it's a real challenge to meet all of the demand. There's a lot of confusion, as people may know. 2 days ago, FDA put out I think a press release and like a Twitter as well from Stephen Hahn, the head of the FDA, saying that there have been a lot of antibody tests that have been saying they're cleared or authorized by the FDA, and of course, probably a lot of people on this call already know that comes from the fact that the FDA had released sort of overarching emergency guidelines for antibody tests, saying that as long as manufacturer had submitted their application and gotten an acknowledgement letter back, which now about 70 have done, then the FDA would not oppose them distributing the test in the United States and having labs use that test. So now I think it's very confusing to a lot of folks, and even the owners of some of the manufacturers themselves. And then there are a lot of sort of, like, I guess you could call them kind of pop-up companies that have maybe stuck their label on a test that someone else has made, and then don't really understand. So there was even one case of one company saying they had been received EUA from the government, issuing a press release through a publicist, and then it not being true. So there have been a few cases where we've been on the phone with state governments that have been really confused about, wait a second, are you, and then of course they want to know, are you approved by the FDA or not? And, if you're being really strict about the language, you're not really approved by the FDA. You've been reviewed by the FDA, and the FDA has issued an emergency use authorization for this product. That's the highest level of authorization released for any COVID-19 test, PCR or otherwise. I think they're now 20, 30 something. Gene, you probably know better than me.
Yeah, I think we got 32 and
okay.
6 for the high complexity. I'll be talking about that in a bit too. But yeah, it's good.
32.
It's interesting you say that, John, because I think the theme that we're hearing from you, and the theme that we're hearing from Jim, and the theme that we were talking about internally as a team is very much this is the week we all need to sort of slow down, breathe, and actually pay attention. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of energy, but there's still these misunderstandings, and the application of those we've really got to work through, and we've got to get right, because as Jim said earlier, we're treating people here. So let's make sure we got that. What
I see one question there from Justin. I didn't totally understand your question, Justin, or comment. It was, we contacted FDA and they said this test was not applicable to the EUA. So Cellex has their own emergency use authorization just for this product that was received on evening of April 1st. It's available on the FDA web page for emergency use authorizations related to COVID-19. And President Trump mentioned it in his White House briefing on April 3rd. So it's received some media attention, New York Times and CNN. If you search on Google, you can find coverage of it. Yeah.
That's great. Let me just do this really quick. We got time for probably one question. If anybody has a question for John and the team over at Cellex, feel free to raise your hand, your virtual hand. As an attendee there, you can raise your hand if you have a question for John, and the Cellex team will open your line.
I have a hard stop at 2:30, just so folks know. So
very good. So you got about 2 minutes. We're going to let, we got one from Chris Kaminsky here.
Yeah.
Chris, you're on.
Hey, I have a question regarding like certification and all this stuff. So like a lot of makers kind of jumped in, and even my group in West Michigan, 3DC19, we're like, now we're looking at the regulatory, like what are the ramifications that groups like ours could see? I don't want anybody getting sued or companies getting in trouble for just trying to help. Ventilators is one thing, but maybe face shields are a less invasive product.
Yeah, we could certainly talk about that at a different section, Chris, and offline. I mean, that's one of the big things here, is getting people put into the right boxes. Really quickly, John Cunningham, question for John from Cellex. John Cunningham, you're on.
Hi, John Cunningham. John Cunningham, Functional Fluidics. We would like to purchase 10,000 antibody strips. How do we do it?
Hey. Yeah, sure. You can send me an email. I've just sent my contact information in the box. I'll send it again right now, the email address, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Those are the kind of connections we're looking to make. Well, John, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for this. Stick around as long as you can, and then we will get the contact list to you too as well. So you can,
and lastly, I just wanted to say thank you to Gene, and also to Stephen Rapundalo at MichBio, and Diana at Michigan Tech Transfer, and other folks that have been helpful. Michael Kung. I really appreciate all your guys' help and advice during this.
That's what it's about, John. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And speaking of Stephen Rapundalo, Stephen, start your video, start your mic. We'd love to have you on.
Hi there.
There he is. We can hear you just fine. Stephen, thank you for being with us. You have been, I've always thought of you, and you just heard it again from John, a connector, a convener, somebody who puts people together. And so I want everybody to know Stephen Rapundalo and MichBio and all that you do to convene people. I don't think that this webinar would have happened without MichBio's mailing list. The first time we said, hey, can you guys do this? It went out and everybody came to join together. So thank you, Stephen, for that. I understand you've been doing a lot behind the scenes at state level and otherwise. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you and MichBio have been doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Appreciate your comments about our help for convening this for you. All the kudos really go to Alicia, my marketing director, so she's the one who manages all of that. But of course, in the broader sense, that's really part of our mission as the statewide Bioscience Association. And, we, in part, we view ourselves sort of as the first stop, the one stop for facilitating and connecting and leveraging our networks, and whether it's here in Michigan or even beyond. Certainly in the context of the whole COVID pandemic, gosh, it's almost been a month ago that we began to cobble together some resources. And let's see, I'll try to I don't know if I can share my screen here or not. Well, anyways, if you go to our homepage, we set up a COVID resource page there where we have a number of links that we began to populate as we got more questions and queries from a variety of folks across Michigan and beyond. And we began to put in links for manufacturers and suppliers. There's links there now for major portals for innovators who have ideas for therapeutics and devices, for scientists and researchers to provide their capacities, as well as those who wish to donate. A lot of this, we had been approached by the governor's team and the emergency operations center to begin to try to connect manufacturers and suppliers. And they, of course, they didn't know the industry, so they sort of asked us to kind of help triage, because I can tell you that we've seen everything from fly-by-nighters to very legitimate businesses of all shapes and sizes. And so we were trying to work directly with health systems who were desperate for various things and trying to make all those cross connections. And then along comes the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They started their Pure Michigan Business Connect Hub. And I'm not one to contribute to redundancies in that. So we, rather than have parallel efforts, we began to direct people to hubs like PMBC and the national hubs at Bio and others, and started connecting some of those dots between agencies, believe it or not, and even at the federal level as well. By virtue of that, hopefully a lot of the folks on the call here on video saw that the MEDC offered their retooling grant program. We were asked to participate in that. We just finished reviewing those applications. And so we've been trying to assist individual companies. John certainly was one of those. And advising others, trying to get around bureaucratic and regulatory challenges, referrals. So we've been doing, we've been doing a lot in that regard. And then there's the whole aspect of our mission of advocacy and policy. And so we've been engaged in various aspects of the CARES legislation, making sure that our industry has been taken care of, everything from essential, whether we're an essential business or not, whether we qualify for various credits and loan programs and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been a busy 3 to 4 weeks.
No, we appreciate what you've been doing and behind the scenes too. So I want to give you a chance to come out here and tell everybody about that. Is there anything, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot, is there anything that you can say about what we hear all these rumors flying around, and half the time it's one way and half the time it's the other, which pretty much tells you we don't know anything, but we hear things about things like, we're going to be talking about shipments from like overseas and stuff like that later on. Is there anything you can say about what's happening from what you've seen at either a state or a federal level with overarching logistics things?
Yeah, I think everything that anybody's heard on the news, best we can gather, is all true. We brokered some deals between suppliers and health systems, only to learn, and these were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, type deals, and only to have those purchases redirected. Basically the rug was pulled out from under them, whether it be by the feds or shipments redirected instead to other hotspots. So everything that you've heard is pretty much true. Mm-hmm. It's created a lot of chaos. It certainly has caused headaches for the state of Michigan. They're trying to compete, as are the health systems, for purchases, and demand is so high that it's causing prices to be inflated, some to outrageous levels. It's really chaotic. I must say though that over the last couple of weeks with my interactions with the state, I think things have, I've been impressed by their coordination and integration and centralization. I think they have come together very nicely. It's not easy to bring various branches of government together, working as cohesively as one possibly can under the circumstances. They've been putting in long hours, and I've been very impressed. And I think we should rest in the knowledge that they're doing a fine job, just like our frontline health providers too.
Very much so, very much so. Well, thank you, Stephen, for all that you're doing behind the scenes. If anyone needs to reach out to you, I assume that they can reach out to you at MichBio. Definitely want to give MichBio kudos for a lot of the connections that have been made here. So thank you for that, and thank you for, as we all are helping to push it up to a state level, fill those databases up and get people put in touch. Really appreciate you being here, Stephen.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Thanks again. All right, next we are going to go. Actually, we've got, I have one of our panelists is going to have to join us just a little bit later in the call. We have the privilege of having Marjorie Jenkins from PrismaHealth. They have the EUA on the VESper connector. She'll be with us just a little bit later. And so we are going to go next to reviewing FDA's updated EUAs and enforcement guidance. And actually, I just have to ask really quickly, is Matt Utley on the call anywhere? He may be joining us later as well. So we're going to come back to a couple of these stories a little bit later in the call. But for now, we're going to go over and talk about the FDA's updated EUAs. And there has been lots of little changes. We talked about some of those top level ones a moment ago. And I would say at some level, the number of things coming out has been a little bit slower, but there's so much catch up that folks are having to do to catch up and understand what's actually going on. And obviously that's what we've been working a lot with folks on at Into Being, is understanding these emergency use authorizations, understanding what you have to do to respond to them. I mentioned earlier, we've got some worksheets for some of the EUAs. If you're thinking especially about ventilators or decontamination systems, you can find those worksheets that are really just digests of the EUAs. But some folks are not realizing, oh, the FDA actually said, tell us this, and then this, and then this, and then this. So if you're going to craft an email to them, better put those things in. And so we'd love to talk to you about that, to clarify any questions you may have. If you have any questions of something that we've covered in a previous week, you're welcome to bring that up in the Q&A section coming up in just a minute. You can also go back to the website, intobeing.com/COVIDconnect. You can find the prior webinars, and you can also find a lot of the contacts that were shared on that. What I want to do first, though, in the spirit that Jim Medsker started for us at the beginning of taking caution, taking pause, really understanding what we're doing here, I wanted to bring Aaron Kara from our team on, and thank you to Aaron, as well as to Adrian Harris, Rick Routson, and Steve Minus behind the scenes making this all run. Hey, we have Marjorie with us. Marjorie, I'm going to be with you in just a minute, and we're going to love to hear from you in just about 2 seconds here.
I'm not sure Marjorie could hear you. She's still connecting to the audio.
She's still connecting to audio. In fact, we're going to do this. We're going to do this very live. We're going to let Marjorie come in. She doesn't even know it yet because her audio is just connecting. We're going to let her do that segment, and then we're going to come back to you, Aaron. So thank you all for rolling with it. Can you hear us yet, Marjorie? Can you hear us, Marjorie? Looks like your microphone's on mute. Marjorie, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. You know, your timing is absolutely perfect. We are live, and we just got done hearing from some other efforts that have done some great things all over the place. And I'm really pleased to welcome you, Marjorie Jenkins, to COVID Connect here to talk with our audience. You're the Chief Academic Officer of PrismaHealth, and I understand you're the FDA liaison for the VESper device, right, which last I checked is the only ventilator accessory cleared under the EUA at the moment. We would love to hear whatever you can tell us about that and about what you guys have done. I know that folks are going to have some questions about the EUA process, and if you're willing to field a few questions at the end, that would be phenomenal. But your timing was absolutely perfect.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to share the work of VESper. I'm also the Dean of the School of Medicine at University of South Carolina, in addition to the Chief Academic Officer, so just sharing that as well. So the VESper device is a fairly simple Y device. It mimics the trachea where it bifurcates into the lungs. Two devices are needed to ventilate, share a ventilator among two patients. That's the optimal use for that device. And it was actually developed by one of our emergency room physicians here at PrismaHealth, Dr. Sarah Ferris, and her husband is a biomedical engineer, and he wrote the 3D code for the device to print that. And they worked with one of our critical care docs, Dr. Antine Stenbet, to test the device in our simulation center. And at that point, we took the device and wrote a proposal for the FDA Center for Devices and Radiological Health to get the EUA approval. At that point, they had been really working on this project for only about 2 weeks when they came to me and asked if I could help navigate through the FDA. The reason they approached me was because I had worked at FDA for 4 years. I left the FDA in August of 2019 to come to Greenville to be the Dean of the Medical School and work at PrismaHealth. So that being said, we did connect very rapidly with Dr. Jeff Shuren, the director of CDRH, and his team. And we had a meeting with them on Saturday afternoon. And the emergency use authorization, in order for the FDA to have the power to give EUAs, they must first have the authority to do that given to them by HHS Secretary Azar. And he did do that for the COVID pandemic. They had not yet had an umbrella ventilator approval EUA authority given, but that also was given on March the 24th or 25th. We received our EUA on the same day as when that was approved. So since that time, we have partnered with J&J Ethicon to produce the devices by the thousands in order to bridge ventilator capacity. This device is only approved during the pandemic. It is only approved when there is critical need at the hospital. But I am really pleased to say that we had a generous donation from the Sargent Foundation here in Greenville, and we're able to give these devices away at no cost to any hospital in the US. And so far, we've shipped thousands of them to hospitals across the US, and we look forward to helping others who need these devices to reach out to us. You can Google VESper device PrismaHealth, and it'll take you to the website, and it says product request. You just put in your request, answer a few questions, and then you'll have a call, or someone will reach out to you pretty quickly, and we can FedEx them overnight if it's a critical need, or within 2 days.
Marjorie, that's phenomenal. And you've got people here from all over the state of Michigan and from many, many hospitals listening into this either live or afterwards. And that's phenomenal. Thank you so much for that. I've got a quick question for you on that. When you were talking with CDRH, I mean, obviously these devices weren't, the ventilators weren't designed to have multiple patients connected to them. Obviously, it is, like you said, only for the duration of the public health emergency, and it's only for critical use. But still, I think there's going to be a lot of people on here who are very interested, because we've got different EUAs going out and people are saying, oh no, what is FDA going to say about this? This isn't a normal 510K. And what kinds of questions did they have for you? What kinds of discussion, if you can share, happened?
Sure. So there was a lot of discussion around the materials, around the durability of the product. We very quickly, after we had that first meeting, I was an engineer in my former life at Kodak, and we stood up 3 subcommittees with over 40 engineers and critical care docs and leaders to begin really going through the final application process with us. To answer some of the considerations. The FDA gave us about a page of considerations and questions that we had to then answer. For instance, you should never put any volatile gases through. This device hasn't been tested in that respect for that process. So there were things that we had to put on the label and the instructions for use that would negate any damage or any volatile gases that might be. So for instance, you wouldn't use this in an anesthesia setting.
Flammability requirements and stuff like that. You're not claiming to meet.
We're not doing that.
What about the breathing gas pathway biocompatibility requirements that are normally there? How did you address that?
Right. So as you said, the EUA is not the normal 510K pathway. It is for emergent critical need only. And whenever I know many on this call will understand that the FDA, whenever they make a decision, they have to weigh the risk versus the benefit of that. So what the risk is here is that COVID-19 induced ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, is uniformly fatal without support. So the question is, if you have the opportunity to share a ventilator among 2 patients and potentially ventilate both of them through this crisis, it could help prevent our frontline docs from having to make that decision between life and death for those patients. So it was really that drastic of a risk benefit where the FDA gave us the EUA. But 1 week later, the HHS Surgeon General put out a vent sharing policy that is also available online. They use the Columbia Protocol, the Columbia Presbyterian Protocol. That is the protocol that's in the IFU for our device. So it is also included in the instructions for use. So we have the Surgeon General, HHS putting out a policy about vent sharing. We then had the really black and white vent, life or death sort of risk benefit. And then we have the EUA process, which allowed it to go out under that EUA. Now, some people may not know this, but there's something called the PrEP Act. And under the PrEP Act, if you do have FDA EUA for your device or your treatment, then there's a huge waiver of liability for you during that crisis. And so because ours is the only ventilator device that it does have EUA approval, then I would recommend that people reach out to us and ask for the device at no cost to be shipped to them so that they are within the PrEP Act as well.
Thank you for bringing that up too. That's something we're going to talk about later today on this call, because a lot of people haven't heard about the PrEP Act, but it does provide some pretty good coverage if you're under the right category. Really broad coverage for you. Everything up to willful negligence, really. Wow, that's wonderful. If you're willing, Marjorie, I'm going to ask the audience here for any questions that they might have. If you're in the audience and you've got a question for Marjorie with PrismaHealth and the VESper device with the EUA from FDA, please raise your hand, stick it up there, your virtual hand, and see if we have any questions from the audience. Any questions on the VESper? Any questions on the EUA process that they had to go through that? Not seeing any questions yet. Oh, I do see one. I do see one from Ken Spencer. Ken Spencer, you're live.
Yes, hi Marjorie, thanks a lot. So I work at University of Michigan in the emergency medicine department there. And one of the things about sharing the ventilators is the patients have to be sedated, correct?
Yes.
Which is a real issue in terms of being widely used to share these ventilators, correct?
Correct. So there would have to be some selection process around that if you were at critical need for your ventilators in order to also match the patients. We know the physiology, you know well, the physiology of the COVID ARDS is very complex and very challenging. We have had some folks, and I'm not advocating for this, but outside of the US ask if they could utilize this to vent share for patients who were non-COVID and had more straightforward physiology, lung physiology, and then to utilize the one-to-one for the COVID patients. So we, like I said, that is not in our label or in our IFU, but we have had people recommending that in a crisis situation.
Great, thanks for that, Ken. Any other questions for Marjorie? Let's see if there's any more there. One quick question for you, Marjorie, before I let you go, and thank you so much for doing this. Our audience is excited to hear from you. In terms of priorities, I think we'll only speak to the ventilator side of the world right now, but from what you've seen of the EUA process, every company out there is going out there saying, I don't have complete information. There's some things I can say, some things I can't. I know some things we've been highlighting for folks have been the labeling and as much compliance as you can talk about to Appendix A, which has all of the standards listed as well as labeling requirements and everything else. What would you highlight or pull back from? Where would you say you really got to include this in your EUA note to FDA? And where would you say, you know, we found that it wasn't quite as big a deal for us?
I think I mean, as much as you can speak to that, that's important. And it also depends, are you looking at a biologic? Are you looking at a drug? Or are you looking at a device? So if we're looking at a device, we really wanted to talk about the durability. We wanted to talk about definitely the specs, the polymer that we were utilizing. We wanted to make sure that the FDA knew that we were utilizing a certified 3D printer to do that. I think for us, partnering with Ethicon, who is a device manufacturer well known, was great because it allowed us to create that label and the instruction for use to the best of our ability. But it is not nearly what you would find in a typical 510K. The other piece that I would say is, especially for devices, you have to be able to track your devices, because after the pandemic is over, these have to be destroyed. So you have to notify who you ship them to. So we have a great partner with a company that's doing that intermediate, that sort of middleman position for us. And so they're keeping track of that big database. The other piece I would say is your adverse event reporting. That is not waived under the EUA. So we have a 1-888 24/7 line that is available for people to call into. We have the adverse event reporting system that we're collecting that data back, and we will be giving that back to FDA. So there are some things that just are not waived under the EUA. I hope that was helpful.
It's very helpful. A lot of things we're going to be talking about in our webinar today as we continue on. Some of the news items you've already laid it out there, especially the adverse event reporting stuff that we've sometimes folks are not quite remembering. Oh, that's not gone away. That's still there. I've got Joan Adamo live with us really quickly for a question. Joan, you're live with Marjorie.
Thank you. Actually, two quick questions. For biocompatibility testing, for a company that's not able to use a medical device manufacturer, but they're trying to assemble a small part to work on a ventilator, they're trying to get out of doing biocompatibility testing, and I wasn't able to determine whether that was truly waived under the FDA. And the second question was, do we have to recall all disposable devices after the EUA, or can we just get confirmation they've been discarded?
Yes, thank you. Those are great questions. First, the biocompatibility is not a requirement. It was not a requirement for our device. And I think because of the rapid pace that you need to get this approval to and through in order to be utilized during the pandemic. But But if you're going to do a printed device, a 3D printed device, I would recommend that you go with someone who is a certified printer like an HP. Hewlett-Packard came to the table for us very quickly and volunteered to print the prototypes. They also connected us with some of their 3D printer subcontractors that are HP certified. So we did put that in our application as well, that we had access to that, because we did not have the partnership with J&J until after we had the EUA. So we were going that route for ourselves. And then you have to just notify the sites that where you distributed that it is no longer under the FDA EUA and needs to be destroyed. And you do not have to recall them back and destroy them yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Joan. Appreciate that. And we should note that none of this is legal advice, and we haven't seen any specific parts here, but I do appreciate your sharing your personal experience, Marjorie.
Right, and yes, definitely not to be any kind of legal or medical advice, but just to share with you, this resource is available. Again, it is available to you online and is at no cost. So if your hospital, if you just want to have them in case you need it for a surge, please reach out to us. We'd be glad to send them to you.
That is so exciting. Well, Marjorie, thank you for being here with us today and taking the time. I know you got a busy schedule, and thank you for what you're doing. We're so excited to hear from it.
Take care, everybody.
Talk soon.
Bye.
That was great. We're glad to have Marjorie with us, and so many cool things happening all over the place. We are so thankful for everything that everyone is doing, and once again, also for all of our healthcare practitioners who are really on the front lines of this. I'm going to bring Aaron Kara back to talk about some of the things that actually Marjorie started to bring up. I don't know if you can come off mute and bring your video up, Aaron.
Yep, I'm here. Let's see
it's
video.
Good to have you.
There we go.
There he is. Even sporting the into being fleece, so it's always great. We wanted to talk a little bit about, you were noticing some drug warning letters coming out with response to the COVID-19 crisis, and I think this is a wise warning, but just take a minute and tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think FDA is definitely still active in making sure that they're keeping track of what's actually going out on the market. There's been a lot of focus starting beginning of March. They were already looking at and sending out warning letters to companies that were advertising mostly supplements, homeopathic remedies for COVID or coronavirus. And so FDA was actively going out and making sure that these companies stopped marketing their products without having done any of the proper FDA regulatory work to show efficacy and things like that. And so I think you got to have some expectation that they're going to continue on doing that, and at some point they'll probably come around to devices as well.
We've had a lot of folks who are often surprised to find out that, oh, don't say anything about COVID-19 in the labeling that you're supposed to be providing along with your EUA, and of course that's a claim, and so it just bears repeating. We've said it all these other times, but you're not trying to go out there making specific claims. You're trying to go out there to provide something that doctors on their own wisdom can use and have some basic safety and efficacy assurances in place, like Marjorie just described to us. I know another topic that you and I were talking about just before, and then Marjorie brought it up, was the adverse event reporting, something that is often forgotten about. And I guess for the sake of time right now, we'll just leave it at that. But if anyone has any questions about what it means to do adverse event reporting, some of the links that are there from FDA, we can put those on the links page. And people
you still have to do it.
Still got to do it. Yep. And I appreciate Marjorie bringing up too a lot of the record keeping requirements are not waived. Labeling, record keeping, adverse event reporting requirements are not waived. Make sure you know what you're going to be doing.
I think she did a really good job reinforcing that their device is really simple. It's it's a single piece of plastic that they're 3D printing, but the operations work that has to go in surrounding that device is not, right? So all of the process and controls tracking and all of the complaints and adverse events tracking and all that kind of stuff is still required. Yeah,
that's great. Well, thanks for being there, Aaron, for that. Appreciate that. And next, we're going to talk really briefly about the KN95 FAQ that came out. FDA is trying to drive some traffic in terms of recommending conservation strategies for N95s. You can find that under the KN95 FAQ. It remains that today, as of yesterday, we now have 2 sterilization providers, Battelle and Steris. Battelle had one about a week ago. You had to ship the masks to Battelle for KN95s, and they would sterilize it and send it back. Steris now has a method. I'm going to ask Rick Routson and Adrian Harris to pop on here with me for just a moment. I know they were just looking at this. It just came out, so we didn't even hardly have time to digest it, but they can tell us a few of their observations about options with Steris. I see Adrian's line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, and I got Rick there too.
All right, so the Steris systems are sterilizers that are already in place in the hospital used for sterilizing medical equipment that is supposed to be reused. So this is not sending the masks anywhere. It's allowing the hospital to use these systems that they already have. The important things are that the mask must be clean, so they can't have visible damage or contamination. They need to maintain a chain of custody from the healthcare provider's mask it is, and it comes back to that healthcare provider. They do that by writing their name on it. They also need to keep track of how many times it's been sterilized. The max number of cycles is 10, so they say, put a check mark on your mask every time it comes back from sterilization. To sterilize it, it goes in a Tyvek pouch with a chemical indicator. This is a hydrogen peroxide indicator, and that's the type of sterilization method used. But you do need to make sure that your pouches or any masks that go in do not have any cellulose or paper materials. I think that's the big highlights for that.
That's great. I appreciate you looking at that. I think we got Rick Routson there too. And Rick, did you have anything else to add on that?
It was specific to the vPro 1 Plus, the vPro Max, and the vPro Max 2 models. So not all Steris systems, but those 3. One was specifically contraindicated, that being the 60 liter one. But yeah, no, I think Adrian captured, other than that, Adrian captured all the highlights that I saw.
That's great. Adrian, go ahead.
I was going to throw in one more thing. It does call out N95 and the N95 acceptable. So, they don't all have to be N95, but if you have a mask that's been qualified, the EUA, that's not an N95, it could still also be decontaminated, but definitely check on the materials and whether or not it's appropriate to put in that sterilizer.
That is phenomenal. Adrian and Rick, thank you both for reviewing that on really short notice. But it sounds like the upshot is if you have a healthcare system and you need to get masks sterilized, you've got the option of sending it to Battelle, or you can, if you have a Steris system, one of these particular Steris systems, you now have an in-house option that can be leveraged through this EUA. That's wonderful. We appreciate that. I want to talk for a minute. I'm going to open up the line with our friend Tripp Adams, who's a recovering lawyer and business person, and who is just trying to connect as many people as he can. I know he's been doing, Tripp, I've got you off of mute, but you can start your video if you're able. He's been doing a lot with the imports of masks, and he's been looking at that a lot. And of course, April 3rd, FDA issued a guidance on, I think did we lose him? There he is. I got you to there, Tripp. Good to see you. April 3rd, FDA issued a guidance on masks coming from China, which of course is a massive supplier. And they basically came out, like we talked on the last show, and said, unless you can prove to us that this has passed some standards testing in EU, US, Australia, Japan, Canada, we're not just going to assume that it's okay. Tripp, I'd love for you to just share a couple words with us about what you're seeing, because you're actively involved in trying to bring these things in. What's the first thing you're seeing in this imported mask world?
I think the first thing they said on the first couple of speakers is the supply chain's just kind of crazy right now, and there's definitely a lot of scammers out there. And so that theme earlier, just take a deep breath and research everything, is the most important thing. There's 2 key letters out there, the March 28th letter, which allows NIOSH approved but non-FDA approved respirators to come in. And this covers N95 and other types of respirators. Key website to go to if you're procuring. We've been helping large hospitals, small nonprofits, and state governments doing it. Just go Google CDC respirator trusted source, and it'll pop up right away. And right on there, you can find out very quickly whether the respirator you're looking at, regardless of all the FDA markings, don't just believe that because it has FDA everywhere on it, you can see whether it's a NIOSH approved. Then the April 3rd letter, that's kind of important because people have been really wanting to bring in the KN95s, different than the N95s from China. And this opens the door for the KN95s to come in, but it doesn't bring all of them in. They still have to meet one of 3 criteria. The first criteria is if the factory that's producing these KN95s is already a NIOSH approved factory. So if they're already producing N95s that are NIOSH approved, and you can find the NIOSH approved factory on the CDC's website, that website I mentioned before. The second criteria is if it's certified under another jurisdiction that the FDA recognizes. And if you look at the March 28th letter, it lists all those: Europe, Australia, Japan. It kind of goes into those jurisdictions. And the third one would be if the respirator can pass specific tests, and it lists those out. They're not really hard to read. You just need to, what someone said earlier, take a deep breath, read through them as a layperson. You can always advise a lawyer, but go through them. And then I think something you said earlier, Gene, if you are trying to get one of your factors in, one of your sources in China or elsewhere to bring in these respirators, when you're submitting it to the FDA, read the question, read the format. The FDA lays it out very specifically, very easy to understand language on how to submit it, and just keep it simple, silly when you're submitting them. And then I think one pass along working this market and trying to procure stuff for large hospital chains that are ordering 20 million or nonprofits that are ordering 10,000 in PPE is there's a lot of scammers out there. This is very much a seller's market. So do your research. Don't have fear of missing out, and make sure that if you're procuring these products, remember you're procuring them for frontline providers, and you need to make sure you get it right, and you can't be giving them counterfeit stuff. I think most people saw in LA, Los Angeles purchased 39 million counterfeit N95s. So it really behooves you to take a deep breath, go on the websites, check these out. Again, the best resource is CDC Respirator Trusted Source. If you Google that, it allows you to see which ones are NIOSH approved, which ones are both NIOSH and FDA approved for healthcare providers.
That's wonderful, Tripp. Really appreciate that. And in addition to going to that NIOSH site and seeing what's there, because FDA is largely giving a lot of that regulatory oversight to NIOSH. Not entirely, there are labeling requirements and other things like that, but largely they're giving it over to NIOSH and other national standards organizations. Is there anything else, any other recommendations, since you're involved in a lot of the sourcing, in terms of, okay, I'm a hospital system, I need stuff, who should I even be talking to? I mean, how beyond going in and doing my research on that list, do you have any recommendations at this point as to who people can be talking to? Do you have contacts that you can privately point people to? Do you, it's not meant to be an advertising or leading question, but it's welcome to be one if that's reasonable. What's the right thing to do?
I do, but I think your hospitals or your state procurement offices already have the right contacts. Okay. My best guidance for them would be if you have a procurement office that's used to issuing a purchase order or a proof of funds over a 3 or 5 day period, or worse, a 10-day period, you need to help them blow through some of that bureaucracy, because in today's market, they need to be able to see the supplies, get a proof of life video that shows today's dates, opens it up, shows the lot number so you can check and be comfortable that it's thing. And they need to issue the PO, the purchase order, and the proof of funds within several hours. And if your procurement office isn't operating at that crisis response mode, then you need to help them clear that bureaucracy up, because you're going to miss out on getting some of these. And right now, like I said, we worked on an order for 20 million N95s for a large hospital chain, and they were getting bumped out. The country of Belgium ordered 1 billion. So that would be my best advice. Keep the sources you've already got from your procurement offices, but just help them kind of speed up like everything else is.
Help procurement come up to that crisis level.
Yeah.
Well, Tripp, I really appreciate your being here and weighing in on that. And based on the conversations that you and I have had, love the work that you're doing on that. So thank you for all that you're doing too. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Tripp for that. Just a quick note, since we're running low on time and I want to get to the open forum so you can all make your needs and efforts known. There's a new face shield guidance out, or a new face shield EUA actually, as of yesterday, 4/9. It really just clarifies a lot of the things that FDA was already saying, but puts them all nicely in one place. And we might have a review of that next week, but take a look at that new face shield EUA. There are now, as we were talking with John earlier, 32 allowed SARS-CoV-2 diagnostics for kits and commercial use. There are also 6 high complexity lab tests. There's also a new ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation enforcement policy out there this week, as well as a policy for visual ophthalmic devices. We may get a chance to cover those in a future update. As always, feel free to contact us if you have any questions on those or any other EUAs or guidances. I wonder if our team back office has an update for us on the FDA town halls.
I did. I put it somewhere safe that I could find it.
Thank you.
Then I lost it. The next one is April 15th, and that is specific to the diagnostic side.
Great. April 15th, next week, on the diagnostic side of things. FDA did just have a PPE webinar this last week, and you're welcome to go to fda.gov and probably drill down to CDRH, and you'll find those webinars as well, where they're answering similar types of questions directly from the agency. Very good. Well, I want to go over to our community forum. This is always a favorite part of the show, where we can talk about what you are all doing and what your needs are. What I'm going to put up here for just a second is the guidelines for the community open forum. And that is, you got about 30 seconds. My name is, I work for, we need, and we are offering. And please use that chat box to all participants and all panelists. Put your name, contact info, and your blurb in there so that we can get it into the database. We do want to talk to, I apologize, I think I got the wrong one up here. I've got an updated list. First of all, we want to talk to conveners, folks who are working with large databases or large groups of people. I want to remind you, first of all, about Pure Michigan Business Connect through the MEDC. And that's an important place to get and give information. Our database will always go to that so that it can be found elsewhere. I also want to remind you of U of M's database. They just updated that, and you can find that on the links page of our website. Also, MichBio has a COVID response database, and there are many other databases listed on intubing.com/COVID-Connect, the regulatory links. You can drill down there and find out more. If he's with me, I want to bring Dan Radomski on for just a minute. Dan, if you can just unmute yourself, we would love to have you join us for a minute, because Dan, you were circulating a bunch of these kind of convener links, and I'm wondering if you could take just 30 seconds and let us know of any conveners that we missed or important high-level things like that that we should know about.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm with Lawrence Tech University. We have a incubator called the Centropolis Accelerator. It's focused on helping companies with physical products and advanced manufacturing technologies commercialize and get into market. And we're really well connected to Michigan manufacturers, Michigan design, engineering. We work with all the major prototyping operations in Michigan, and a lot of the low to medium volume manufacturers. So when this COVID crisis hit, we kind of casted a net out to the thousands of manufacturers we knew in Michigan and asked, who can make personal protection equipment. These are some of the the items that are needed for healthcare providers, and who's in a position to and can retool to get up to speed. And so we're lucky enough to get literally hundreds of inquiries from Michigan manufacturers, many of which already had the ability or were in the process of making items like face shields or masks. Some didn't always make them right here in Michigan, but they had, international operations, could make them in China, Europe, or wherever. So what we did is kind of consolidated that and then got, that list of Michigan manufacturers together to be able to, get those important companies and their information and their personal protection equipment items into local hospitals, assisted living centers, and in-home care firms. And why I wish we were doing a lot more and more effective in that area, certainly have at least helped out a bit. And we've been working with those that are making isolation gowns and hand sanitizer, disinfectant, you name it. And then as we got involved with this, obviously being funded and supported by the state of Michigan, we worked very closely with Michigan Economic Development Corporation and a number of the programs, as you mentioned, Pure Michigan Business Connect. And as you know, they did a great job of very quickly going out there and allowing for a portal to list the type of products that manufacturers can make, as well as the demand side, right? Aggregating and understanding who needs these, whether you're a hospital or assisted living center. So I recently sent out an email of all the different portals that are out there where a manufacturer can list themselves, as well as caregivers can list their needs and connect and be able to procure, right? So it's not only the Pure Michigan Business procurement database that's set up for this COVID environment we're working in, but Michigan Manufacturing Tech Center also has a supplier portal supporting this. There's some independent firms like Industry Star that put together a similar type of portal and connecting point, and then others at the federal level, as you know. And then the other kind of programs are for those that are Michigan manufacturers maybe listing. There was a couple major grants that came out. Unfortunately, one already passed, and that was state of Michigan had a retooling grant for Michigan companies that needed to retool and or take on critical supplies to make personal protection equipment. And then there's one very specifically for Oakland County manufacturers that was just launched yesterday. Obviously, you have to be Oakland County business, but there's up to $700,000 total pool. And that'll support, again, Oakland County manufacturers that are looking to retool, manufacture any critical supplies, pay for labor, and so on. So
that's great, Dan. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that list makes it into a link on our links page. And then also, if anyone has a question, Dan's really been keeping track of a lot of those convener things. And Dan, will you put your contact information in the chat so that we can get people in touch with you?
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I want to put out the call for any other conveners. We're looking for large organizations that are maintaining these kinds of databases or resource lists. We're very thankful to MEDC, as you've heard many times, for doing that at the state level. We're trying to push everything up there. If you have something you want to bring up as a convener, we want to hear from the real conveners at this point. Go ahead and raise your hand. I've got Rayanna LaWarren.
Hi, Jean. This is Rayanna LaWarren. I've got 3 groups that I'm working with right now. The first one is OperationMasks.org, which is a Silicon Valley, California nonprofit group that is working with hospitals and U.S. health systems in order to import products, PPE, primarily from China. They've asked me to help them by being the point person here in Michigan. And if there is a group purchasing or even individual hospital or health system that needs help in getting through the process, just because they have a small team of volunteers that's basically helping these organizations get set up. They do have escrow services through their investors. So that's one. The second one is I'm working with a group called GMB that's overseas in Europe and getting product in a similar manner, but they're coming from different areas of the world. We're also working with them on escrow services. I'm the primary contact for them for hospitals and health systems. And also Rob had put his information out on here. And the third group is Ford Motor Company. So put them in touch with a couple of groups over this last week, and we are having some difficulty, of course, as everyone is, getting the source raw material fabrics for N95. So I'm working directly with their buyers in order to find and source the fabric for N95. It can be Australia, Japan, US, EU. So if anyone has a lead on that raw materials procurement, please feel free to get in touch with me, or if you have your own direct connection at Ford Motor Company, please do that as well.
Great, thank you for that, Rhianna, appreciate it. Any other conveners, representing conveners? We would love to hear from you. With no hands for that, I want to put out another call for healthcare professionals. We recognize that many of you who are on the front lines cannot represent your healthcare system. We all know that this is a very tough time. We all know that you can't necessarily represent the healthcare system. So what I want to offer today is if anybody has any update for us, any needs, if you don't want to be known publicly, but you want to type only into the panelists. The panelists right now are only into being employees. There are no other panelists currently on the panelist list. If you want to type a message only to the panelists, don't send it to everybody, but send it to the panelists. If you'd like to update us or ask a question without being known who you are, we will not state your name. We will not state your healthcare system, but you are more than welcome to submit an anonymous statement on the portal there to the panelists. While we're waiting for that, I want to go over to material suppliers and see if we have any material suppliers on the call. Folks, especially, you've heard it, if you're on the list previously, we've got some great folks who supply metals and other things like that. What we're really looking for right now is folks we haven't heard from or have new updates from us, especially on mask materials, as well as, I'm sorry to say, body bag materials, as well as gown materials. Those would be some of the hot items, as well as, let's leave it at that for now, mask materials, gown materials, and body bag materials. Raise your hand if you are a material supplier. Raise your hand if you're a material supplier. Okay, no new material suppliers. We do have a list of some. We have also got folks who are working on the N95 issue. Certainly a big thing. I want to also then open up to test houses. We had with us, and I'm afraid I don't see them on the list right now, but I want to put a word out there for Murray Godwin with SGS in Appleton, Wisconsin. We had an extensive conversation earlier this week, and it appears that SGS is able to do the flammability and fluid barrier protection that's required for surgical mask testing. They are not a house that can certify N95s, but they can do testing, and they have contacts to do testing for N95s. I think many of you have heard that Nelson is the only certified test lab for N95s, but our friends at SGS can do testing of many types of masks, and we've already checked that some of the standards they test to are exactly the right ones. So I hope you will make contact with Murray at SGS. Yes, Aaron.
Nikki Kennedy said she's available to speak.
Okay. We'll bring Nikki on just a second. And any other test houses? If you're a test house or you represent a test house, or you can tell us about test houses, we would love to know. Okay, I've got, oops, I had Justin Heil's hand up there. Justin, you are live.
Yes, I don't currently work for a test house, but I used to work for UL Intertech, which was ETL, and also have contacts at SGS as well. And I know some of the standards they work down were biocompatibility as well, even of the tube sets, and then a lot of the other just full ventilator testing and those type of things. So just FYI, have backgrounds and contacts with those type of tests, including flammability as well.
Okay, so are you saying that this is something that you, if people want to consult with you as a former not current UL person, you can advise them on what might be required there?
Yes, and definitely point them in the right direction.
Okay, and name the things again that you have experience in.
Ventilators, patient monitors, flammability tests, biocompatibility, those type of tests, and then material properties as well. But there's a lot of other labs that can do that would need to necessarily be certified as well. And then also auditing services. So if you're looking at having some lots or products looked at prior to shipment, we do have relationships with SGS and TV in other markets that they can do that independent validation as well. I think somebody mentioned earlier having a live open box or something like that. Yeah, didn't really think about that, but then also having accredited individuals that would also typically do ISO 9001 audits and other things. They could look at lot shipments too before they go on the plane to go out to make sure you're getting what you ordered.
Well, that's just phenomenal. I really appreciate your making yourself known, Justin. And please put your contact information in the chat box to all of the panelists. And we would love to put people in touch with you because that's a phenomenal resource you have offered there. Great. Any other folks who are familiar with testing or test houses? Okay, let's see. I wanted to go over briefly to Nikki Kennedy. Nikki Kennedy is with us. Nikki, is there anything you want to add to the conversation?
Hey, Gene, thanks. No, actually, I know I had emailed you earlier. I just wanted to reiterate that if anyone is looking to connect with healthcare resources in terms of docs who could maybe look at some of your devices or designs, again, I do not speak for a specific health organization from this standpoint, but we've got connections everywhere. The Detroit medical community and the medical community at large has been really coming together. I also just wanted to say that if there are healthcare professionals out there who are a little concerned about putting their individual voice, please reach out to me. I can make sure that we don't include your name or your health system, but I would be very interested in hearing what your problems are so that we can start to aggregate some results. I'm happy to speak on behalf of people and just bring some hopefully unbiased aggregate thought into this kind of conversation, especially if you yourself are not comfortable speaking up.
That is great, Nikki. Really appreciate that offer. Thanks for doing that and for all that you're doing all over the place. We really, really appreciate it. Okay, I want to hear from any other, at this moment in time, any other manufacturers or diagnostic folks who are working on diagnostic efforts. I'm going to open it up for manufacturers and diagnostic folks. Then we're going to talk about some regulatory assistance folks. And then for those who still have questions, we're going to leave it open a little bit longer than normal, and we're going to talk about your questions at the end. But I know a lot of folks have a hard stop at 3:30, so we're going to honor that. So first of all, manufacturers and diagnostic efforts that have a comment or you want to make known something new that wasn't made known on a previous call. Your information is in the spreadsheet that'll be going around. It's an updated spreadsheet. It's all cleaned up. Thanks to Chris and Michael. So I do appreciate their work, and it's going to be a nice spreadsheet. Okay, I want to just tell you a little bit. Obviously, we into being are really pleased to be able to bring you this and to do the sort of live thinking about these EUAs and how to apply them. But we're not the only people who think about this kind of stuff, and we've told you about some other groups. And in this time of need, it's not enough for one of us to be here. This is something where you need to reach out and get answers wherever you can get them and talk to folks. So some groups around that have a presence in one way or another in Michigan. We've got MDRS LLC, Kay Fuller. She couldn't be with us today, but she and I were just talking the other day, and she's working on some EUAs. So MDRS is out there. I want to see if we've got, I believe he is, yes, Michael Tomasevich with RAA is live with us. And if you can just unmute your mic, you will be live with our audience. And I'd love to have you say just a couple words about RIA.
Oh, thanks a lot. Just make sure you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Great. So RIA's been around for about 15 years now. We worked with a lot of companies on Michigan. Worked with Dan Radomski, who had on earlier, and Keystone, Jim over there at Keystone. And we help guide companies with understanding the regulatory landscape for bringing these products to market and navigating the different issues that might present them.
That's great. And so folks have questions on EUAs. Are you guys actively working with those?
Yes, we've had a few people that reached out to us, and we've been providing those guidances for them.
Great. Well, Mike, thanks for being with us today, and we'll add your contact info to the spreadsheet and make sure it gets around to everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And next up, I want to tip over to, if he's with us, Carmine Jabry with Emma International. If you're with us, can you raise your hand? Want to call out Emma. Emma just had a webinar on the EUAs yesterday. Nice overview of a lot of the EUAs, as well as a really nice note at the end about how other things are slowing down at FDA. They're focusing very much on the crisis, and there's some things that are going to take a little bit slower path. So it's good to know about that as well. We will follow up with Carmine, but feel free to reach out to Emma International. Also, Russ and Rita King at MethodSense, as well as Nicholas Werner at Network Partners. Any of these folks would, I'm sure, be happy to answer your questions about EUAs and have been in the community for a number of years. So thank you to all of you. What we're going to do now is we're going to open it back up to questions, either live questions that you may have about the EUAs, ones that you type into the chat box, ones that our staff brings live, however they come. We'd love to answer your questions. For those who can't stay with us past 3:30, we do understand. We thank you for being with us. We're going to leave it open for another 10 or 15 minutes to answer any questions that have come through. So let me go over to Aaron for just a minute to see if we have any questions that we want to answer live here on the air.
I'm not seeing too much. There is a question about asking how the hospitals are doing. And I think there's been conflicting information on whether hospitals do or don't, or have been able to or not able to get the PPE. I think from our standpoint, we don't have enough information directly from the hospitals and providers to be able to answer that question clearly at this point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of information that we don't have. I'm just sort of scrolling through some of the written questions. Maybe we can speak to them really briefly. Looks like the April 3rd letter question got answered. VESper, of course, is for if people have different ventilation requirements, it's probably not going to work. You need to have that balanced out. And a question from Justin about advice when running into import questions from logistical companies, customs. If you do have questions about that, I know that Tripp might be able to answer some of those questions. Any of us who work with the EUAs can at least give you some understanding of what FDA's position is. There may be other import-export issues that you're running into, and definitely encourage you to reach out to folks at the state level and people working with those kinds of things. Steve Rapundalo was on here earlier, and I know he'd be happy to talk to some folks about that as well. We're going to go to the list here. Anybody with a question, Q&A on the line, feel free to raise your hand if you have it. Chris Kaminsky, you're on.
Hey, just wanted to kind of ask regulatory and the UA type related questions with the maker groups that are forming. So like there's Operation Face Shield on the east side, you know, in West Michigan, we have the 3DC19 group, and it's not like really any one entity that's, you know, that it's not like a business that's selling a product, right? So what should these kind of groups have in mind when they're doing this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Chris. And also, Chris's group 3DC19 is acting as an aggregating point for a lot of folks doing 3D printed stuff. And I'm sure, Chris, even as we're answering this question, I think if folks want to reach out to you who have a 3D printer and want to contribute, is that something that they could look to you to become a hub for?
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
3dc19.com.
Great.
To register.
So I think the answer to your question is it depends on what they're doing. There's a lot of regulations around the ventilators and the diagnostics that take a very concerted effort. And we just heard from Marjorie today, who had quite a few connections and quite a few resources behind it, and that was able to move forward relatively quickly. There's a relatively high hurdle for ventilators and diagnostics and extracorporeal membrane purification and things like that. So that's probably a space where the makers want to say that's not our quick win to really be able to help folks. On the side of PPE, great places to focus are things like the gowns, things like dust masks that don't come with any claims. I have to emphasize that, right? The minute you start making claims, things get very different. The face shields has been a good place for people to focus. The swabs, maybe not so much. We've got folks like Keystone working on swab stuff, and I know it hasn't been it takes their level of sophistication to really make the swab stuff work. So I think we would tend to push people in the direction of the face shields, the gowns, and some basic masking. It's really important to understand some of the things that FDA is asking for. One is don't make claims. Don't go out there and tell us this protects you from COVID-19. Do not say that. Do not make any claims. If you can, don't make any medical claims about it, because that's going to trigger you into a higher scrutiny category. The whole thing with N95s is that they actually do filter a particular level of particulate. So if you're not able to prove that through NIOSH or other certifications, don't go claiming you're an N95. We do have a lot of efforts where people are sharing PPE for gowns and stuff like that. One of the things I'm very interested in follow up to this call is getting people, especially the commercial sewers, engaged with that, because now we've got docs weighing in on the gown designs that are now coming out open source. If you're talking specifically face shields, and we can follow up in more detail afterwards, but there is this new guidance from FDA. Some of the things that you're required to do there is specifically disclaim the flammability certifications that you would otherwise need to have. So you've got to say, we're not using this in a flammable environment. With the face shields, you also need to list the materials that are contacting the user. There are other labeling requirements in that. So it's not like go out and just do whatever you want. But for something like a face shield, if we get the labeling right, usually that's something that the makers can contribute to. The dust masks, if we get the labeling right, usually that's something that the makers can contribute to. I'll go back to you for a minute, Chris, but hopefully that starts to answer your question.
Yep.
Great, thanks for being with us. And if anybody is a maker, especially on the 3D printing side, feel free to reach out to Chris, because I know he's been aggregating a lot of people over there on the west side of Michigan. Any other questions, comments? We'd also like to hear from people who are, maybe you've got an idea, maybe you've got something that you think needs to happen, and maybe you don't have a way to make it happen, but maybe somebody here does. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to know what your thoughts and your questions are. We're going to stay on the line for just a moment more. Yes, who do we have there?
Dan Radomski.
Hey, Dan, welcome back.
And I'm not sure if you already communicated this, but you were talking about gowns and activating, sewing operations. Isaacs, which is the Institute of Sewing that's here in Detroit, has done a fairly good job of consolidating all the sewing operations here, whether they're industrial or literally seamstresses. And they're getting all the designs for masks and isolation gowns, and they've activated like 80 sewing operations in Michigan.
Wow.
Some of them being fairly large, like Fairway Products and Hillsdale, that did industrial sewing, Detroit Sewn, and others who've already been making masks, now switching to isolation gowns. So Jen Guerrero, who runs that group, I can send contact information. she's an important person to know because she's helping some of these smaller sewing operations get connected to not only the designs, but the procurement, right? So she's connected all the way up to the state of Michigan and taking a huge bulk order that will go to like emergency medical centers that are going to be at TCF, Cobo Hall, State Firegrounds and Novi's, Suburban Showplace. Those are all going to be emergency medical units. So if anybody, needs to find a way forward for both the design and the procurement, that's a good place to start as Isaacs.
That's great. Dan, I wonder if you would be willing to follow up after this with Erin Kara from our team who's maintaining our sort of links page. I want to make sure that we're getting that stuff lined up, because we've just been talking with some nurses and stuff who are saying, yeah, we've got gown needs and stuff like that, and I'd like to get them connected to that as quickly as possible. That'd be great, Dan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dan, just put the link info in the chat, and I'll make sure that our website gets updated.
That's what I'll do.
Great, thank you. So other questions, other comments, things that you want to share with the group before we close today? We would love to hear more from you. Ken Spencer, you're on.
Yeah, so Gene, I sent you earlier the press release that we were finally able to release from Michigan Medicine on the project we've been working vigorously on for several weeks now. If that could go up on your link, we could share it to everybody just so they're aware of it, what we're working on there.
Tell us just the 10-second version of what it is, Ken, and then we can add that to the links page.
Okay, so we're basically leveraging, powered air purifying respirators, PAPRs, which have been around in the industrial realm for some time. But we reverse flowed it, so it ends up being a personalized negative pressure environment. And the beauty of that is that it allows us to use HHFNC equipment, which heretofore has been contraindicated because of the aerosol activity that can go on out there. So it really creates a vigorous environment protecting healthcare workers and people that aren't quite ready to get on a ventilator or are coming off a ventilator. And it solves the issue of that we talked about before with Marjorie, where you have two people that aren't compatible, let's say, or something like that, right? You could actually have a room full of 12 people with this. It also enables things like safety flight and ambulance crews that can transport suspected COVID-19 patients, which they cannot do right now because of the possibility of infecting all the equipment stuff around there, right? So safety flight can't bring anybody in there. And so for instance, things like Navy ships, had you had this particular device and even original PAPR equipment together, that solves a huge problem for people, for the Navy ship stuff, right? You have current PAPR stuff for people that are not infected, and then this device for people that are infected. And so it has huge implications on the military side, and they're all over us right now trying to get this thing done.
That's really cool, Ken. So personalized negative pressure, and yeah, let's follow up this week, and we'd love to hear more. Are you guys thinking about submitting an EUA in the near future here for that?
That's exactly what we are. I can't use the Navy vernacular. We're very hard to to get that EUA submission together. We're working with Kay Fuller, which you probably know.
Yeah.
So we already have got her under work, and we've been working with a local Michigan manufacturer that has been very cooperative and doing lots of non-recurring engineering with us, but we can't say who they are yet because they don't want reporters all showing up at their doorstep while they're working on this thing. So
no, that's fine. Well, I hope that especially if you get some word back from FDA this next week, we'd love to check in with you next week and hear how it's been going.
Sure will.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Really quickly, going over to Erin for a moment. I don't know if we have it up on our listing page, but Olaf asked, is there a website source for finding all the local US-based manufacturers of face masks, FFR like N95 or KN95? And that's obviously right now, that's the NIOSH list largely, which you can search on the CDC website. Do we have a link to that?
Yep, I have a link to that. The respirator trusted source link is on our website under the one of the CDC headings.
Great. That's the thing
that's where I would go to look to see what manufacturers have already approved respirators.
Yep, that's great. Good to have that there. Good. We'll make one last call for questions or comments. We do appreciate everybody's taking the time today to connect, and it's been another great time together. Thank you for all that you are doing, to every one of you from wherever you are, and to all of our healthcare workers. One last ask for questions. Raise your hand if you have a question, or type it into the box. But seeing no more questions or comments at this point, we're going to close it here for today. The webinar will be at intubing.com/COVID-Connect with all the other webinars, as well as the contact databases. And as always, if you're looking to do an EUA development work, don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to help you. And if we can't, we'll get you in touch with others as well. So thank you for your time today. Have a great day.